Alright guys, this is Wells Only, and as promised I'm here to deliver on the short form video for the charts, and the objective is to just get people to, well, new people for Hex to come and see the data and understand the power that Hex contains and that it is a solution for their long-term financial goals. So let's get to it. Name is Wells Only. I am the, I guess, purveyor of the Hex data sets and charts and facts and figures, I guess, to some degree. I do reach out to the community for assistance from time to time. So my work is not mine alone. I'm here to merely relay what Hex is to everyone that is interested in learning about it. Disclaimer: the information displayed in this broadcast is known to cause increased amounts of FOMO. Wales Only and his guests are not responsible for any losses you may accrue for having weak hands. Just so you guys know, I will not typically be having any guests on the short form broadcast. This is really to talk about the charts and get right to it. So this chart is detailing the first 456 days of Hex since it came out on the exchange. The first 16 days are not captured due to an exchange error. They deleted the first 16 days of data on a specific exchange that Hex was listed on at the time. It was only one exchange. They did an update, didn't save Hex's data, is the story as it goes. And that's why we only have 456 versus the 400 and I think it's 69 days of the in total. So as of today, we're up 211% post big payday. Important to note. Um, TShare's index is the yellow line with the, well, first off, let me state that we are reviewing an apples to apples comparison of the return streams between Bitcoin, Ethereum, Hex, and T-shares since their inception, respectively, through their first 456 days. So we're comparing return streams for each of the four instruments since day 0 to day 456. So as of now, Bitcoin, and this instance in time in its existence back then on day 456, is only at 0 because it didn't have any live transactions until day 562. Ethereum index, which is this orange line with the orange hue, is at 928 or 929% rounding up. And as you can see, Hex and the T-shares indices, which are respectively pink with the white hue and pink with the yellow hue, are significantly outperforming both Bitcoin and Ethereum by a factor of 5 and 4 and some change, respectively, for Bitcoin and Ethereum with respect to the Hex index. And then the T shares are just phenomenal. 8,533% rounding up. And, it's just Hex doing what Hex does, being great. Hex post big payday, as most of you might know, this is my favorite chart. And the reason is because this is what I think is going to be what lends Hex's real power, because what we're ultimately going to be seeing here is how Hex just really shines relative to all of what's been done with respect to the launch phase, and the structure that took versus what Bitcoin's structure does, which is halvings ever so often. Right now, we're at the third halving of Bitcoin, and that occurred most recently, almost a year ago at this point, 10 months approximately, on the 11th of May 2020. And currently, the first halving index is at 581% on an apples to apples comparison, right? I'm comparing age streams or age return streams, so that when we're looking at is a true apples to apples comparison of performance, right? From day 0 to day whatever have you, because the objective is to make sure that what we're looking at is in line with the respective behaviors that we should be expecting to see, right? And just like we raise children, just like we deal with people and expect them to be certain ways at certain ages, this is basically what we're doing here when we're comparing Hex to other items in terms of days, in terms of the same quantity of days, and from their initial existence to the present point in time. So the first halving index is this orange line with the blue hue. And that is currently at 584%, 582%, 581% rounding down. The HEX Post Big Payday index is at 211% rounding up. And as you guys can see, we maintained support for a long, long time, around 121%. I'm sorry, not 121%, but 100 and I'm trying to remember what that value was. Let me just take a look at my data real quick here because I can do that. And it does seem like this stream might run a little longer than anticipated because there are 20 slides to go over. All of them contain, sorry about that, all of them contain important information that we need to go over. So we will be doing that in this video for sure, because that's the objective anyway. It's not so much to just run through it, but to make sure that it's just a strictly focused chart or a strictly focused video on this information. Okay, so from what I'm seeing in my data set, it's basically just hovered around 160. This level here is basically 160, 165. And now we've basically ran up to 211%. And this is the HEX index, which is the pink line. And now below that, we see that the third halving index has rolled over. And we're now trading at 122% respectively. And the second halving index is trading at 114% respectively. The third halving index is the green line with the blue hue, and the second halving index is the blue line with the yellow hue. And just to note, HEX is underperforming the first halving by 64%. It is, however, outperforming the second halving by 85%, and it is indeed outperforming the third halving by 73%. We'll keep moving from here, folks. This is the infamous TShare to Ethereum and TShare to Bitcoin chart. So what we're showing here on the on the right and left axes is the TShare to Ethereum and Bitcoin values as a percentage, 0 to 100. So basically what we're trying to show here is basically the wallet share. For the most part, that's one way to think of it. But what I would like to highlight here is just how T-shares always maintain their value, right? And that's embedded in the system. And as we can see here, we've had a nice move up recently over the past few days. Or maybe Ethereum and Bitcoin are taking a big move down, right? It's a ratio, so it's important to understand that it could be either or. And it's important to know which, depending on what it is you're trying to do. Currently, the T-shares to Ethereum value is at 10.7%. The T-shares to Bitcoin value is at 33 hundredths of a percent. So again, this chart is just up and to the right, and there's a lot of sideways action here. So expect a lot of upward movement here shortly. We'll move on to the next chart. HEX Payout Metrics. I think I'm gonna eventually remove these or remove some of these just to make this video a little shorter. I'm already at 9 minutes and I didn't want to run past 10, so I'm really trying to cut this down. So daily payout 63.1 million. Payout per T-share 5.9 for the most, basically. Total T-shares is 10.695 trillion or million trillion. Payout per T-share sum index, my favorite chart. As we can see, we're just a hop, skip, and a jump away from 150,000%. And what this line is saying is that if you were staked with one T-share since inception, you would have earned a return of 150,000%. It's incredible. I know. It's amazing. Daily payout index is 11,404% rounding up. Total T-share index is at 2,133%. This is a closer view of the, oh great, I didn't even put the updated one in here. But it's fine. This chart is just basically showing us the payout per T-share and the total T-shares, but in a closer view. Again, I'll just rechange the format. This is the first iteration. You guys let me know what you think. We're just gonna keep running through these charts here. This is the payout. This is the Omega chart, Alpha and Omega chart, because it gives us the payout per T-share sum, which is all of the hex that you've received if you were staked with at least one T-share since inception. I mean, this is crazy, right? Because it's just crazy. All right. So here we have the hex index, which is at, as we know, is at 5,035%, rounding up. Payout per T-share index is already up fivefold since inception. I mean, this is just, again, this is what you would have. This is what the system has done since inception, as far as paying out per T-share, and that's a number that's gone up 535%, rounding up. Phenomenal. This is the T-share rate versus the APY. The T-share rate is a yellow line, and the T-share rate essentially determines how many hex you need in order to acquire one T-share. And right now, currently, that number is at 17,051.2 hex per T-share. The APY is at 37.89%, and as you guys can see, the ratcheting mechanism for the T-share rate will constantly drive the APY higher. So it's merely a matter of how many T-shares you have as a function of what the system is going to pay. Because ultimately, if yields do get driven down, it'll be a function of staking. If the because the T-share rate is going to be higher moving forward, right? So the only way APY can go down is if staking becomes a major factor, right? Meaning the pool doubles, the staking pool doubles or increases by 50% or something of that fashion. It has to be a significant increase. But again, in conjunction with bond math, this would dictate that price is actually going to move up significantly in order to address that balance, right? Because bond math states that it's a scale. And it's a scale because it's an instrument that pays a yield, and given that it pays a yield, the price must match that yield in order to reflect that risk characteristic. So it's really just a control system that's embedded in the mathematics of the product. It's nothing more than that. So we keep it moving. And this is the Hex Stop Flow mimicking chart. And basically what we're tracking here is the T-share rate along with the dollar value of the T-shares. And right now, what we're seeing is a $186 T-share value rounding up, and the T-share rate is at 17,051 hex per T-share. And again, this chart is really a phenomenal chart because it's showing you where the value is with hex, and it's also showing you how the T-shares move in dollar terms in conjunction with that value. And the reason it's important is because we want to know when hex is undervalued and when hex is overvalued, because this is what allows us to take advantage of the opportunistic points in time in the system, like this right here. Like this point right here, when hex was taking the dip most recently, that was a great time to buy the dip because you could have gotten some cheap hex in conjunction with a relatively cheaper T-share rate, because when the price of hex is down, what happens is that the quantity of hex that you can get per T-share goes up. So that means you can actually acquire more T-shares at a relatively more beneficial rate because the dollar value of hex is cheaper. Because it's important to remember that the T-share rate will always be the T-share rate because it's given to you in hex, always. So the only way to take advantage of that little tidbit is by realizing that your arbitrage in this instance is going to come from the US dollar value. So that's something that I just like to highlight here and there. And the next chart is really going to bring that to light. And this is the cost of 10,000 hex, which is my favorite chart, really. Um, just because it really highlights when it's time to address the need to buy some hex and when it's not, like when it's cheap and when it's expensive for the most part. And as I can see, I made a little error with my coloring of the font here for the total TShare, for the TShare over 10,000 hex. But it's really just a TShare rate divided by 10,000, so it's really just 1.70512 over here. And hopefully if your guys' screen is bright, you guys can see it. But it's basically just that, and it's just a TShare rate. And that's really all the TShare rate is. It's just multiplied by 10,000, and that's why you see it in that way. So that's just a function of the math in the system. But the beautiful thing about this chart is that it tells us where the T-shares are. It tells us where 10,000 hex are. So this is essentially the delta between the present value of hex, meaning the 10,000 hex, and the future value of hex, meaning the T-share value. And I know we've talked about this before on the stream, and those are terms that if you're not familiar with them, you should really look them up to actually understand and learn what they mean, so you can internalize the definition, so you can really grasp what this relation is, because I can tell it to you, because it's easy. It's really easy to understand, and the words kind of give away the connotation of the meaning of both. And the meaning of both are present, literally, within the terms. Present value equates to what it should cost now, and the future value equates to what it should cost in the future. And that's literally it. So that's something that's important to understand as you look at this data and try to consume it and understand exactly what it's saying. So we'll keep moving. But as you can see, with the T-share rate going through a little gyration it's gone through recently, now it's a time where it seems like it's going to just start ratcheting up again. We had Big Stake come out today from the big hedge fund, 3 Hours Capital. And, in true professional fashion, they seem to understand the math, and they restaked for 10 years. To their dismay, they're not going to benefit from the remaining 5 years of the staking, math, but it's okay. They probably have something else up their sleeve. They do still have some liquid hex in their bag to maybe stake, or maybe they'll dump some later on. Who knows? But hexagons always be ready to buy the dip. That's all we can know. So the only advice we can really be trying to consider at this point, and hope that they actually do so. So this is the expiring shares all-time chart as of 3/11/21. I didn't update this chart because I just wanted to leave it, because I'm pretty sure it's going to look kind of different by tomorrow, given that we are now have additional expiring shares here to the tune of 100 and I don't know how many thousand shares. I don't remember, but I'll definitely be updating this chart for the next time I do this. But this is the before. The after will, I'm sure, be crazy. This is the all-time hex to Bitcoin correlation chart. The hex returns are on the x-axis. Sorry about that. And the main thing I like to highlight here is how hex is typically to the right side of the x-axis, showing the positive skew in the return streams for hex, meaning it's a product that typically trades to the upside on most days, which is not the same that can be said about Bitcoin. Now, while we do know it's up over time, it seems to be a more painful ride, where the y-axis gives us the behavior pattern for Bitcoin, and as we can see, the return streams are very wide, meaning that the price action is very volatile in the coin. Same deal with ETH, Hex versus Ethereum correlation. However, it's important to note that the grouping for both with respect to the scatter plot is relatively benign compared to Bitcoin. Oh, you know what? I never noticed something before. This is not true. This is not true. Ethereum to Hex is actually, or Hex to Ethereum is actually more volatile. How so? Because you can see that the range in the y-axis is actually greater for Hex versus Ethereum than it is for Hex versus Bitcoin, which actually makes sense because Hex is a lot less valuable relative to Ethereum than it is, right? Because Hex is only going to cost a minuscule fraction versus Bitcoin relative to Ethereum, which is, I don't know, 50 times less expensive, right? So the variation is going to be greater with a smaller valued pair. So that's what we're getting. That's what we're seeing here in the swings of the scatter plots between Bitcoin and Ethereum, and why the range is wider for Ethereum versus Hex and Bitcoin. But as you guys always see, the R squared, which is a measure of correlation, is 0 for Hex versus Bitcoin. Even and it is also 0 for Hex versus Ethereum. Now, what I wanted to just say was that even though the slope is slightly positive and in Ethereum is slightly negative, which is actually interesting because this is the first time I've seen this since I've started doing these data sets. The slope is usually positive. So now we're entering an interesting junction where we're kind of going opposite slightly to some degree from Ethereum lately. So this is a new, this is just new altogether. So this is just something important to keep an eye on. See what that slope does moving forward. But again, little negative trend line, a slightly negative trend line, and a correlation of 0 keeps the doctors away. And this is the payout per TShare chart. This chart is where I show the value of Hex in terms of US dollar at the orange line, the payout per TShare, which is what you receive for one TShare daily, in the pink line, and today that value is at 6.5 cents rounding up. The Hex price at the time of this was 1.095 cents rounding up. So the adjusted Hex price, which is the sum of the payout per TShare and Hex, is at 7.5 cents. Is that maybe the future value of Hex? That's one way of looking at it. And you can consider the Hex value for the day the present value. But long story short, this is the adjusted Hex value, and it's not really the present value because you got paid today, right? So this is really the actual price of Hex, assuming you're staked. Because the reality is that we have to look at this just like people like to look at Bitcoin, which is it being one Bitcoin equals one Bitcoin, right? So the way I look at it as is one Hex equals one Hex. So we're gonna regulate Hex. We're gonna compare Hex, right, in that fashion. So that's why I'm gonna look at payout per TShare versus Hex and give you an adjusted price, and that be the actual value of Hex if you're staked, which is the objective of the protocol anyway, right? So you want to maximize the benefits of the system. You buy Hex, you stake it, and you receive this benefit for for every quantity of Hex that you have, for every number of Hex that you have, based on the TShare rate. And this is the infamous Hex to price earnings ratio chart. And again, I'm not going by TShare rates or anything like that. I'm merely going by a one-to-one relation between Hex and price, and the notion that we want Hex to ultimately be its own system one day. So we're going to look at it as one thing, and as of right now, it's at a value that you're just probably going to just never see again in your lifetime at 0.16925 or 952. I mean, and it's important to understand that price to earnings is telling you what you're paying for future earnings now. So for every dollar you're laying down, you're basically getting back 5 times your value. I mean, it's really more because it's less than 0.2. but you get my gist. It's significantly more. You're just getting a lot for you're getting a lot of bang for your buck, and that's important to understand when you're buying Hex, because this is basically what this chart is showing you. You're paying 1 cent, but you're really getting 7.5. That's very important. Very, very important to understand. Very, very important to understand. And this is the all-time S&P 500 price to earnings ratio. And as you guys can see, I always like to highlight, this is the lowest point in history, 5.51 times, meaning you are paying 5 times the earnings, whereas in Hex you're paying a fifth, or less than a fifth, really more like a sixth. So it's probably like in between. But you get the gist. So that's the video for today, guys. Thanks for tuning in. I'll keep making this better, and give me your feedback. Let me know what you think, what I should change, what I should do. I try to keep it as short as possible, and this was as short as I can do. This is a 19 minutes, 19 slide deck. I'm gonna try to minimize the number of slides in order to make this video even shorter. Again, the objective here is to relay the most powerful information that Hex has to offer, because my objective is to help people that come across Hex understand that this is a powerful tool that will actually give them financial freedom in ways that they couldn't imagine possible before. So please help me in making this as good as it can be, not just for me and you, but also for all those that are coming in the future. And thank you, and have a good one, guys.